So good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the small delay due to some technical issues. I'm joined by three people, good friends, good colleagues, who would be reporting on what was discussed with wind energy, agriculture, and maritime and marine. So without further ado, I pass the floor to Danny Robrecht from Vergeert, who will tell us all about wind energy. Danny, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lev, for having me this afternoon. Well, we were discussing Earth observation opportunities in wind energy, and the sector represents a huge potential. Today, the sector has about 220 gigawatts installed base, and it represents in the energy mix 25% of the demand. And because Europe wants to be carbon neutral by 2050, that energy mix is going to shift to 57% depending on electrification, which is a huge growth. And for wind turbines, that means that the installed base has to increase with 5 to 6 times more than there is today. And obviously, we can ask ourselves, can we find sufficient number of locations? Will we have technology that provides sufficient output and production? And will we have solid policy making in order to make this happen? The wind energy sector is looking at upscaling offshore windmills, but also wants to untap or tap into the potential of floating offshore turbines. Obviously, installed base has to be reconfigured by repowered or more powerful wind turbines. And we'll have to find a way to integrate wind turbines more into our onshore areas by having windmills that are less noisy, visually more attractive, etc., etc. Earth observation can play an interesting role in that. It can help scaling the industry, and it can help lowering the costs. Basically, we see three applications where Earth observations can really make a difference. The first one is basically wind energy forecasting. If we have to provide 57% of the energy mix by 2050, then we need to ensure that we can provide that capacity, and forecasting what wind energy can provide in a particular time, near real time, in the next few hours, in the next few days, is obviously very interesting in order to ensure the provision of electrification. The second application is wind farms planning, basically choosing locations. If we intend to have 5 to 6 times more installed capacity, also onshore, but also offshore, then we have to find ways then we have to find the right locations. We need to understand what happened over time with particular landslides, or we have to see elevation models of terrain and terrain models. We have to understand how they evolve over time in order to site basically and to select sites in a safe and sustainable manner. And the third application was about Earth observation could help in predicting better the weather basically, and to make sure that the planning of operation in hazardous environments is improved over time. Basically, we see a sector which is very interested in Earth observation. They are already starting to make use of it, let's say in the back office, in the planning and the siting, which is the most urgent applications of the three. I understood. But the sector is obviously looking at Earth observation as a substitute for manners as they work today. And as in any substitute, the sector demands themselves either you perform better and cheaper, or either you perform radically better at the same cost. And the business cases have not been proven yet entirely to the industry. The industry is also facing a challenge to whom to talk to. In a sense, they don't have the in-house skills and capacity to deal with the complex data, to harmonize the data, to develop the models and the algorithms, and to build solutions. So they are looking, while the industry on Earth observation side has all the building blocks and the puzzles in place, but the value chain might not be organized in such a way that service providers are easy accessible by industry partners. So that's a challenge at both ends, I think, and also at Earth observation end. In our discussion, basically we concluded 3 major steps to be taken. I think the sector of wind energy needs to talk more to Earth observation specialists in order to understand what it can do, how it can work, and where to go to, basically. A second thing that we put up front was data products have to be standardized, they have to be harmonized, they have to be made, they have to be accessible, basically easy to fit and transfer them into data products which are useful for wind energy end users. And the third action we put up front was basically we have to drive more tests, we have to drive more pilots. Maybe de-risking the adoption. Maybe funding can help in that, obviously, in order to adopt and de-risk quicker and making sure that Earth observation is being transferred and adopted more rapidly by the industry. Once that's being done, Lev, I think then it becomes a challenge to make Earth observation the new golden standard, because it has all the potential to become very, very important for this rapid growing industry. And maybe one bold question to put up front is, if we talk about siting location, then this could also help, Earth observation data could also help policymakers to basically streamline the process of permitting, because that's slowing down because of complexity. And obviously, if you start to permit, you have to understand also in which kind of areas to permit, and that has a link to the siting problematics of the industry. Lev, I hope that I gave a kind of a good, comprehensive and clear depiction of what we have been discussing. So over to you.
Thank you, Danny. You certainly did. Thanks a lot for bringing many interesting points. I think there is good sense that some of the other, probably more traditional sectors in terms of using Earth observation will tell us that there will be definitely similarities there. So in that regard, I would like to pass now the floor to Karel Kalevert from VVA, who would summarize what was discussed with Marine and Maritime. Karel, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Lev, and good afternoon, everyone. As indeed, we discussed how to reach the sustainable blue economy in our sessions this afternoon, and the session actually started with a question on why Earth observation data and information is so fitting for the maritime and marine sector, and the answer was very simple. It was basically that there are no infrastructures that are blocking any of the satellites and all the data we can get. So that was the immediate introduction to the session, and we started basically with an overview of the maritime and the marine industry, how it is a sector with a huge diversity in activities and in stakeholders, how it is expected to bring in almost 3 trillion by 2030 at the global level. We saw that, maybe not surprisingly, that tourism is one of the biggest elements of the maritime and the marine industry, and when it comes to employment and when it comes to the creation of added value, followed by port operations and the maritime transport. And from this, we actually moved into all of the evolutions that went through Earth observation data, how it went from the 80s with fairly low resolution pictures to the kind of information we can collect now. When it comes to Earth observation data and all the needs that arise, the needs are clearly linked with the mid-ocean data, with awareness, maritime awareness, with monitoring of all activities on the oceans and seas, and also linked with the near shore pollution and all the negative consequences caused by our human activities on our oceans and seas. So we have abundance of data, and there's more and more data and information coming from our Earth, from our planet, that we are able to collect with Earth observation. But it is also raising way more questions than actually answers. And it is true, there's this famous question, do we know more about space than we actually know about oceans? And yes, there's a lot of information that we're still not knowing about our oceans. And Earth observation is basically a very useful tool to provide more data and more information and more insights in our oceans. It gives a global picture. It is never sleeping, so it keeps on collecting data, and it also provides data where even the human eye would not even be able to see. So these are the high-level advantages of EO in the maritime and marine field. So when talking about specific Earth observation applications, we looked into how the use of Earth observation is being used for monitoring of vessels, how it allows for ship detection, allows for legal and illegal activities to be spotted and monitored. We looked into the oil spill monitoring, how it not only provides an image of where it currently is, but also how it evolves over time. The same can be said for the harmful algae bloom, which can be easily monitored through Earth observation data, as well as any offshore assets monitoring and activity monitoring. So we discussed these activities, we discussed which kind of users would be the most prominent ones in these fields. And when we then continued the discussion and the presentations into a bit more field-like, who should start really using EO data, who can reap benefits from it, it was clear that the tourism sector, as one of the biggest ones in this field, can definitely benefit from relying and using EO data. So that was a very, very strong point and a very interesting point. When talking about the added value or the value propositions of Earth observation data, we made a link with the poll that was actually ongoing in the side of the panel, where we were asking what are the main drivers of Earth observation. Is it climate change? Is it the technology adaptation? Is it the human population growth and therefore the need for food that is rising? And there was a very interesting combination made between Earth observation and artificial intelligence, how the combination of both is not only leading to data, but is actually leading to intelligence, that we are able to really now process all of this data through the use of artificial intelligence and other innovative technologies. And how climate change and the need for sustainability, which is clearly is demand driven, how the combination with this Earth observation and artificial intelligence and everything is a very perfect match actually to address these issues and these challenges. Very specific examples of how EO is clearly a way to tackle illegal fishing activities was brought up in several use cases. When talking about what is really one of the added values and the things that we all should take care of or pay attention to, it's that we have a lot of data, but it's not about the quantity of data. It's obviously about the quality of data, but it's not only the quality of data. It was also discussed that the customer care is an extremely important and more becoming an important asset of the whole segment. The users are, of course, getting more and more skilled and aware of what can be done with EO and how to use EO data and products. But it is also very clear that the less complex it is for the actual end user, the better it is for them. We had an example of how you can ask Alexa to play a song in your house, which has a huge amount of technology behind it. But for the user, the only thing the user has to do is actually request a very simple question, and the technology behind Alexa does the work. And it's the same with the EO data. We need to be able to have a very simple user interface so that the users can just reap the benefits of EO data without having too much of the complexities behind it themselves. We concluded. Yeah, we had a very interesting session, of course, and we concluded then with maybe the €1 million question. There's so much going on already, so much has been done. Earth observation is beautiful and it is so powerful, but it is not fully tapped yet. What should we invest in? And the panelists, they brought up elements such as from the operational point of view, there are significant barriers still. There's the latency, which is rather slow. So improvements in latency would be able to improve the operational use of Earth observation data. The European Union invested so much money in Copernicus, but the regulatory framework can be used to also foster the uptake of EO. I'm going to wrap up now, but one of the elements that was really to pay attention to is that there are so many useful case studies and so many success stories already, and it's really important to tap on that potential and leverage what are currently the success stories. So that's it from my side.
Thank you very much, Karel. This is very insightful indeed. Also picked up a few very interesting points that you have raised, and I think again we can find synergies and similarities between the different sectors. Let's hear now from Dara Boyle from Evenflow, who will tell us about the agriculture session, and let's try to see where all this will come together at the end. I should say also to the audience that you can raise questions in the questions area, so we can pick up a few questions at the end. Please also explain who do you address them to.
Thanks very much, Lev. So I'm reporting on the agriculture section. We had a very interesting discussion. We opened with Daniel Azevedo from Copa Cogeca. He introduced the state of play within the industry itself. Obviously, Copa Cogeca represent thousands and thousands of farmers and cooperatives. So he had a good feel of what the industry think about the way the future of the industry and the future of EO within the industry. He said there's a lot of pressure within the industry in the last year, obviously due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but all the supply chains kept moving, and they're very proud of that. So I asked them the question about, did they feel they are resilient to issues in the future, and they feel COVID-19 was a real tester for them, but it's really proven to them that yes, they can battle through all this stuff in the sector, and EO has definitely helped them play a part in that. He did call for some new regulatory framework to support further innovation in the sector, specifically targeted to right down to the single farmer level. He spoke about there are many issues with access to broadband, even 4G. No, we're not even talking about 5G, drone licensing issues, new genomic technologies. So moving on from him, Ilias, our EO evangelist, gave us an overview of the current applications for EO in the sector. Obviously, the big ones are precision agriculture, variable rate applications. He also spoke about the ongoing, but it's going to be even more focused upon in the future is the Common Agricultural Policy, adopting and encouraging the use of EO and its monitoring and checking for breaches in compliance. He also mentioned insurance, agro insurance. He believes maybe a big sector in the future, which will use EO as part of its compliance checking as well. He did mention there are still some perceptions of complexity of EO and some skills issues. There's also some worries about privacy issues from certain farmers and worry that raw data from EO may not be able to get processed into actual insights. But this is the challenges that the EO providers need to address and prove to farmers that it is possible to get great value out of EO. So some of the further gaps and challenges, going back to Daniel from Copa Cogeca, he talked about the fact that farmers sometimes need to be need to be told that this is purely science-based, it's safe and trustworthy technology, and they can rely on it. Many farmers rely on older forms of growing their crops and different indicators. There are still some that are a little bit hesitant to adopt the new technology. A major gap and challenge is the EO providers understanding what the farmers need, and even the farmers understanding what the EO providers are capable of. So agronomists need to better understand how data processing works, and then vice versa. EO specialists need to understand agronomy better. That was a constant theme of the discussion. Some of the tips, there was a question was asked about what tips would you give to service providers if they want to enter the EO applications for agriculture. One of the main ones was that they should follow the money. So start with the use cases that are currently, the issues that are very currently costly to farmers. If you can tackle them, you can prove the efficacy of EO and the value it can provide to them in their day-to-day lives. Once again, we went back to the whole idea of customized tools. When farmers look out onto the market, they often see the market as huge with so many options, maybe not exactly tailored towards their exact needs. This is a kind of gap that needs to be addressed. It may just be a perception that farmers have, but the whole idea of simplicity and interoperability is something that when the average farmer looks for a technological solution, they're often overwhelmed. Finally, the future applications of EO. Obviously, the big applications are in the variable rate application, crop yield forecasting, but a kind of consensus on the panel was that agri-insurance and yield prediction in the long term is going to be a huge field of growth within agriculture. So the final takeaways really were that EO is quite well integrated in agriculture already. It's well known about. It's not a technology that people aren't aware of. Even despite some confusion and despite the aging workforce, that's not the issue. The real issue, seen from the farmers level, is interoperability and simplicity. You can get one app for one thing, you can get one drone technology for another thing. Not everything works in harmony right now. Not everything is simple to access from one source, and the R&D activities need to be strongly linked to what the farmers on the ground themselves want, and tools that can be easily customized by them themselves. The final comment that was said, is if an EO service provider spends a day with a large farmer, they'll come up with 20 new applications that they may have never thought of before. So bridging the gap between service providers and real customizable demand from the farmers themselves is really the gap that we have to address.
Thank you, Dara. Thanks for this very nice overview. I think all three rapporteurs have shed light on both challenges and opportunities. Maybe just very quickly summarizing the summary myself. So we heard quite a lot from all three on skills and capacity. We heard also about the valorization of what is being provided. We heard about the simplicity of interfaces, and in the case of agriculture, especially the part about interoperability. But perhaps more interestingly, we heard also things about how the communities basically of the supply and the demand side should work closer together, and how, even with this example now by Dara, if someone would really spend even just one day with a farmer, they would come up with something perhaps a little bit more valuable. Okay, this of course comes as an extreme, but it highlights, I guess, the underlying issue. The regulation point was tangible in all three cases, and of course, de-risking of innovation and how this can be supported through research and innovation. Perhaps what would be an interesting takeaway for all of us after this, and in the meantime, we can see if there is any question to address, is that in a way, it seems that there is still today a barrier when it comes to awareness from the EO side of what the vertical sectors really need, from the vertical sector side of what EO can really provide. And the paradox that was also discussed in the marine session that I was attending is that we need to talk a lot among ourselves until we don't talk anymore about it. And that's where the success will really be achieved. There is one issue raised in the questions, which is about value chains. And I guess this is really what underlines also the point that I was just making. But if any of the rapporteurs want to also comment on that, you're free to do so. So it's the question about what end users are looking for is only information somewhere at a given time period, and they don't care about basically which asset sources or let's say any technological source this comes from. So I think we all agree on that, and actually it was part of the discussions that we attended. So unless anyone wants to share a specific thought on that, I would pass the floor back to Martin, who would close the whole session.
Thank you, Lefteris, and to our rapporteurs, of course, for delivering to the audience these summary points and trying to find synergies between these three wonderful sectors. And now we will take a quick 10-minute break to sort out some details on our side before we are joined by Fiammetta Dani from USPA and then Emmanuel Pajot, the ERSC Secretary General, for some closing remarks on the Fire Forum. But please do not forget that soon at 5 we will be hosting the live award ceremony, where we will actually have present different types of awards and different winners. I hope to see you all there. Thank you very much.